Deep in the middle of a sun-scorched desert, a man named Volk, who just so happens to be a rogue CIA operative, is out there doing something, well, pretty suspicious. He's digging holes and quietly burying a bunch of dead prairie dogs. Yeah, you heard that right. Prairie dogs. Not your usual desert activity. As he's going about this weird little chore, a park ranger suddenly shows up. He's curious, obviously, and starts asking Volk what he's up to. The ranger's tone makes it clear. He's not buying whatever story Volk is trying to sell. Volk, trying to play it cool, shrugs and says something like, "What? Can I say I dislike prairie dogs? Like, that's a totally normal reason to be out in the heat burying animals." But before the conversation can go any further, and here's where things take a sharp turn. Gabrielle Joubert, Volk's cold-as-ice bodyguard and lethal assassin, casually strolls over. And just like that, without hesitation, she kills the ranger with a blade. Quick, silent, brutal. No emotion, no warning. It's chilling. Once the scene is clear, Volk and Joubert finish up with the prairie dogs, cover the graves, and then make their way back to their camp. And let me tell you, this isn't some rugged survival setup. Nope, it's a full-on, high-tech desert hideout. Inside the tent, there's a sleek, well-equipped lab buzzing with activity. A group of scientists are hard at work, laser-focused on developing a dangerous biological agent. All right, so 3 years have passed already. Joe Turner, now a junior analyst at IEP ACIA Front Company, joins his co-workers Sam Barber Jr. and Sam's wife, May Barber, for a date. They want Joe to try dating again, after his last long-term relationship ended suddenly 6 years ago. Although Joe insists he's fine, May grins, grabs his phone, swipes through Tinder, spots Lily Partridge, and sends her an invitation for drinks. The next morning, Joe wakes up to a buzzing phone and sees Lily's enthusiastic yes and feels excited. He smiles, grabs his briefcase, and heads off to work. Suddenly, Sam calls, asking Joe to swing by his office for a meeting. Sam even tracks Joe's phone to give him turn-by-turn directions, and then tells him to hop into a waiting van. Inside, Sam leans over and explains they're heading to a meeting with Joe's uncle, Bob Partridge, who leads the FBI counterintelligence team and the CIA's deputy director. They plan to discuss a program Joe wrote 2 years ago to screen overseas employees at terrorist targets and assess threats. Joe nearly chokes on his coffee, kind of stunned, when Sam adds that the software has been live for months and already flagged a suspect named Omar Nazeri, a Saudi national living in the U.S. Sam drives Joe straight into the heart of Langley, where he lays out the whole situation. He explains that Nazeri recently picked up some mysterious package. Yeah, nobody really knows what's inside. Joe frowns, uneasy at the thought that his screening program is now sweeping up American citizens, and tells Sam he should talk to his uncle about it. Sam shrugs and says, "Not now. Right now, Nazeri's headed to a packed stadium with that package, and we've got to move." Just then, Deputy Director Ruel Abbott and Uncle Bob Partridge walk in. Abbott leans forward and asks Joe what he thinks. Joe clears his throat and points out that the software wasn't designed for domestic screening. He'd need to tweak a few variables before trusting its numbers. But Abbott waves him off, saying they already have a 12% threat probability on Nazeri and all the intel they need. Bob presses Joe, "If you were running this show, what would you do?" And before Joe can answer, they all watch as Nazeri arrives at the stadium where a CIA hit team waits in the wings. Joe stands there, heart pounding, and thinks it just feels wrong to kill a man based solely on a computer's judgment without any real proof. But Abbott cuts him off, eyes steely. "We don't have time for second guessing," he says, then gives Joe a curt nod. "Thanks for your service." Later, Joe slips back into his apartment, mind still spinning from the day's chaos. He flicks on the TV. Anything could happen at any moment, right? As he watches the screen, his phone buzzes. It's Lily, reminding him about their date tonight. He quickly grabs his coat and heads back out. Over dinner, Joe can't help but stare at the TV every few seconds. Lily shrugs it off, assuming he's just a diehard football fan, or maybe a gambler. Suddenly, she stands up. "Fine," she snaps, "I'm done." Joe chases her out to the sidewalk. "Hey, I'm really sorry," he blurts out. "It's been a rough day, and I forgot to cancel." Lily pauses, softens, and agrees to let him walk her home. She asks about his job, but Joe just shrugs and says, "Honestly, I'm thinking about quitting." They share a laugh, wonder aloud how two single people even exist in a city this big, and, smiling, make plans for a proper second date. Later that evening, Joe's phone buzzes. He sees it's his Uncle Bob calling. He takes a deep breath and answers. Bob's calm voice comes through. "Joe, I know how you feel, but sometimes we have to do bad things now to prevent terrible things later." Joe runs a hand through his hair, uneasy, and tells Bob he can't stay involved in a program that spies on innocent people. Bob sighs and says, "Fine, turn on your television. We'll talk tomorrow." Then he hangs up. Joe flicks on the TV, half expecting nothing. But his blood runs cold when the news anchor reports that Omar Nazari was intercepted at the stadium, carrying a modified strain of pneumonic plague with a 100% mortality rate. Suddenly, everything feels a lot more complicated. The next morning, Joe walks into IEP and finds his coworkers Gordon Piper and Tracy Crane gathered around the coffee machine. He blurts out, "Guys, did you see last night's news? Our screening program actually stopped a bioweapon attack." They exchange stunned looks. Gordon rubs his eyes, and Tracy lets out a low whistle. Later on, Joe and Tracy head out to the fire escape staircase for a smoke break. Joe pulls out a cigarette and admits, "I was ready to quit this job. Honestly, I couldn't stomach what we were doing, but after seeing that report, I'm not so sure." He shrugs, sounding conflicted. Tracy takes a drag and nods, exhaling slowly. "Look," she says, "I get it. You hate the idea of spying on regular Americans. But thanks to that program, millions of people you don't even know are now safer. Imagine if that plague had gone off. The fallout would have been absolutely catastrophic." She stubs out her cigarette and adds softly, "Sometimes doing the dirty work is the only way to keep everyone else clean." Joe stares out at the city skyline for a moment, caught between the morals he believes in and the harsh reality he helped prevent. Not long after, Bob Partridge strolls into the IEP bullpen and, with a proud smile, congratulates everyone on foiling the stadium attack. He admits, though, that they still barely know anything about Omar Nazari or who's really behind him. The strange device they picked up looks like a Rubik's Cube on steroids, way over anyone's head, and Bob's convinced its creator must be gearing up for more chaos. So he slams his hand lightly on the table and orders the whole IEP team to drop whatever they're doing and throw every resource they've got at tracking down this mastermind. Meanwhile, cut to a dimly lit apartment, Volk calmly pulls that same kind of device off a shelf, tucks it into a case, and hops into his car. He drives out to a quiet airplane hangar, opens the case for a U.S. ambassador, and, with a cool nod, wishes him a safe flight. Back at his desk, Joe watches a news report about the busted stadium plot. He perks up when the reporter mentions the CDC has quietly stockpiled cipraloxacin for decades, a vaccine straight out of sci-fi that fights this plague. Joe pulls up trading records for big pharma companies and spots 12 firms that unloaded over $1 billion worth of stock right before the attack. It looks random, but Joe knows there are always patterns if you look close enough. He grins and tells himself, "All right, time to dig deeper," even though the rest of the team rolls their eyes and mutters, "Here he goes again." Volk's phone buzzes with a warning. Joe Turner might be a liability. He shoots a quick text to Gabrielle Joubert. Mission: eliminate the IEP team. Priority: Joe Turner. Later that evening, Joe's nursing a drink at a dimly lit bar when Joubert slides into the seat beside him. She smiles and says, "Hey, could you pretend to be my boyfriend for a bit? This creep's been trailing me." Joe, caught off guard, nods and goes along, totally unaware of the danger she just unleashed. Meanwhile, Sam Barber Jr. paces a deserted parking lot. Suddenly, Volk steps out of the shadows and drops a bombshell. Their contact Vasily Siren just snapped up shares in cipraloxacin manufacturers. And Joe, Volk growls, he dug up the proof. Then, with a cold edge in his voice, Volk reveals the hit order on the entire IEP team. Sam stands frozen, shocked, but Volk insists it's the only option. Back at her place, Joubert coaxes Joe upstairs, and, well, things get intimate after she teases him for details about his work. Meanwhile, guilt haunts Sam at home. He strips off his jacket and hammers a punching bag until his knuckles sting. May pleads with him to come to bed, but he just can't switch off his racing mind. In the small hours, Sam copies every scrap of evidence on Volk's schemes and the looming false flag attack onto a hidden hard drive. He drives to meet Uncle Bob, who's staking out Nazari's apartment, intel in hand. Sam grips the drive, teetering on the edge of handing it over, but then, in a flash, he decides to hold back, uncertainty twisting in his gut. Early the next morning, Joe wakes alone in his quiet apartment. Joubert's nowhere to be found. He rubs his temples, trying to shake off the dread, then races to IEP, his heart pounding as he steps into the cold dawn air. The gates stand wide open, the lights dead, and for a split second, Joe feels like he's in a bad dream. He glances at Tracy, and they slip outside to light up cigarettes under the empty streets, trying to make sense of what's happening. Almost on cue, Gordon Piper strolls in like nothing's wrong. He hands a steaming coffee to Lily Partridge at the front desk and casually asks her out. When Lily politely declines, he flashes a crooked grin and confesses he spiked her drink. Moments later, she pitches forward, out cold. In that instant, Joe realizes Piper's a traitor. Right then, two masked assassins burst through the doors. They execute the guard and Piper without hesitation, then sweep through the offices, firing on anyone in sight. Joe and Tracy watch in horror before dashing for the stairs. Bullets rip past them. Tracy falls, struck down. Joe dives into the basement, pressing himself against the cold concrete as the killers chase him. He fights his way back upstairs and bursts into the street, running until he ducks into a crowded train station. With his chest heaving, he doesn't hesitate. He hops onto the next train out. Meanwhile, halfway around the globe, the senator lands in Saudi Arabia to hand off the weapon to a courier. On Joe's train, he slips into another car to stay ahead, completely unaware that Joubert watches him from a shadowed window. Back at headquarters, Joubert and Deacon Mailer debrief their team. Their watcher hacks into street cameras, tracking Joe's every move until he leaves the train. Joubert tails him carefully to avoid raising suspicion. When Joe reaches street level, Mailer steps out, and Joe bolts. He ducks into a nearby church, hiding behind a pew as two assassins chat with the priest, clueless he's there. They leave after a few tense moments, and Joe slips away into the night. Outside, Bob Partridge learns about the IEP massacre. The news crashes over him like a freight train. He storms into the office and freezes at the threshold. Bodies scattered everywhere. He steels himself, then orders a complete news blackout to keep Joe safe. When Sam Barber Jr. hears Joe made it out alive, he finally exhales, relief washing over him. Volk figures Joe will reach out sooner or later. He just knows Sam must have helped him somehow. Sam waves him off, insisting it was all blind luck, but Volk cuts him off. Our plan can't move forward with Joe alive. If he calls you, you end him, or hand him over to someone who will. After that, Volk strides off to meet Vasily Sirin, a private military contractor with zero qualms about messy business. He flashes back to their first meeting, when a younger CIA agent named Volk almost bit at Sirin's offer to work for him. Now, Sirin's brutal ambitions and Volk's own hatred for the Muslim community line up perfectly. When Volk accuses him of risking everything with a tangled web of shell companies, Sirin just shrugs and promises they'll wipe Joe out and unleash the virus exactly on schedule. Remember, Sirin reminds him, this is my operation. My money comes first. Sam drags himself home early that evening, riddled with guilt, and tells May he's feeling off. She nods sympathetically, then plans a visit to Kat Gnezdi, whose husband, another CIA agent, was killed recently, and urges Sam to rest up. As soon as May walks out the door, Sam tears into his laptop, ripping out the hard drive and watching it shatter in pieces. Meanwhile, Uncle Bob Partridge shuffles the Joint Terrorism Task Force into the IEP office to investigate the accident. His phone rings. It's Joe, trembling and confused, calling to ask what went wrong. Bob suspects the CIA's been compromised. IEP was supposed to be their secret hideaway, and orders Joe to lie low and trust his training until Bob can get to him. They agree to meet at a quiet park, totally unaware that the Watcher has overheard every plan. The Watcher passes word to Volk, who immediately warns Sam that assassins have Joe in their sights. Bob's team digs in, but hits a dead end. Maybe extremists pulled off a revenge strike with inside help. Their lone survivor? Joe. So they start to suspect he's the mole. Bob stands up for his nephew, but his ears prick when he realizes Gordon Piper and receptionist Lily Partridge both grabbed coffee from the same cafe, and only Lily got poisoned. That detail convinces him Gordon must be the inside man. Across town, Sam sits with his little boy, who senses his dad's sadness. When the boy asks, "Did you try to fix things, Dad?" Sam can't shake the question. Far away, Bob slips out of IEP to meet Joe, not knowing that Joubert and Mailer are tailing him. The Watcher reminds them Bob shouldn't be in danger, and immediately the assassins move into position to follow his every step. Joe's already parked at the Little City Green when Bob's black sedan pulls up beside him. Bob hops out, strides toward Joe, and then, bam! Mailer blows Bob's airbag right in his face, knocking him cold. Joe barely has time to register what just happened when Joubert raises her rifle and levels it at him. Out of nowhere, Sam comes hurtling around the corner, firing his pistol, rat-tat-tat, forcing Joubert to dive for cover. Sam grabs Joe by the arm and yanks him into the back of a rusty sedan as bullets ping off the doors. "Hold on," Sam shouts, and he guns it down the street. Inside the careening car, Joe's heart thumps like crazy. He squints at Sam. "Why is Joubert here?" he gasps. Sam glances in the rear view. "Remember the stock intel you unearthed? She's one of the killers we sent after you." Joe's jaw drops. He grips the door handle. "How'd she even know about that?" he blurts. Sam shrugs, his face taut. "Doesn't matter now. We've got to get out." Fear spikes through Joe, and in a split second he jerks the wheel. The car veers off the road and slams into a street lamp. Sam scrambles out to help Joe, but Joubert's already closing in. She squeezes off 2 shots. One strikes Sam in the chest, and he crumples to the pavement. The other rips into Joe's side. Joe slumps against the door, breath ragged, as Joubert disappears into the shadows. Back at Langley, Bob drags himself into his office, face smeared with blood and dust, just in time to watch TV news anchors label Joe Turner primary suspect in IEP killings. The story flashes photos of Joe's mugshot and descriptions of the carnage. Bob pounds his fist on the desk. "He's innocent," he yells. But Marty Frost, Bob's replacement and ex-lover sitting across from him, flips off the TV and says flatly, "You're too close, Bob." FBI already decided. That finality settles over Bob like ice. Later that night, Lily Partridge hears frantic pounding at her front door. She opens it, and a battered, bleeding Joe stumbles in, eyes wild. "Please," he rasps. "I need a minute." He clutches a vest under his jacket and still holds Sam's ruined pistol. Lily's heart pounds. She barely recognizes her Tinder date between scars and desperation, but she guides him inside anyway. She ducks upstairs to grab a blanket, flicks on the bedroom TV, and freezes when she sees the same news report, now branding Joe a murderer. Downstairs, Joe strides in, trying to explain through gritted teeth, but Lily shakes her head. She backs toward the door. Panicking, Joe lunges and pins her gently against the wall. "I'm not a bad guy," he pleads, pulling out the gun. "Just lie down, okay?" Lily stares at the barrel but slowly nods and sinks onto the bed. Joe lies beside her and whispers, "I promise I just need to rest." By dawn, Volk sits in his living room when an encrypted text pings, Joe Turner is alive. In a small suburban home, May Barber wakes up next to an empty bed and feels a chill. Later, her phone rings with the dreaded news. Sam's gone, Joe's on the loose, and she collapses, tears flooding down her face. That same morning, the FBI summons May to headquarters. Agent Abbott grills her about any connection to Joe and hints she might be linked to foreign intelligence. May stares back, shaken. Abbott leans in, voice low. "If you're hiding something, your family could be in danger." May swallows hard. "If the CIA didn't know, how could I?" she fires back. Next, we meet Special Agent Eva Piper, girlfriend of one of the slain IEP staff, slipping into her office at dawn. She bumps into Bob at the gate. They exchange tense nods, then head inside. Bob dumps a stack of Joe-related files on Marty Frost's desk, but Marty barely glances at them. She smirks and says, "Save it, Bob. You and I both know you're just trying to crash the boys' club." Bob straightens, eyes fierce. "Joe didn't kill anyone," he insists. "You need to look beyond your grudge." Meanwhile, Joubert bursts into a hacker's dim apartment, gun drawn, demanding Cobalt-level encryption keys. Back at Langley, Eva sits at her desk when her phone buzzes in her bag. She pulls it out. Bob's on the line. "Welcome to the task force," he says. "I wiped your ties to Robin Larkin. Now help me find the real story behind Joe Turner." Eva's gut tightens, but this time, she knows which side she's on. Meanwhile, at Lily's apartment, Joe's still hunched over his notes, while Lily, casually leaning on the counter, eyes a can of pepper spray. She picks it up and teases, "So what's this research all about, Joe?" He offers a nervous half smile and says, "Well, I actually work for, a government intel outfit, and things got more complicated than I expected." He crosses his arms, lowers his voice, and admits he suspects the CIA might be pulling the strings behind all this. Lily tilts her head and wonders out loud, "You really think they won't trace you?" Joe gives a confident shrug and replies, "Trust me, I'm pretty damn good at what I do." Elsewhere, Gabriel Joubert's hacker furrows his brow at the screen, convinced he's locked onto Joe Turner's digital trail. After a few tense minutes of frantic typing, he throws up his hands, realizing Joe scrubbed his tracks so thoroughly that 0 breadcrumbs remain. Back at CIA headquarters, Eva Piper leans in across a cluttered desk, listening to team member Jude Barber explain how they'd cracked the phone Joe turned in right after the shooting. Eva rubs her forehead and mutters, Why hand over your own phone if you plan to, kill everyone? Not willing to sit back, Joe fires off a stealthy counterattack. He reverse hacks the hacker's laptop, breaches the system, and slams a message on screen demanding, "Who sent you?" On the other end, Joubert coolly fires back with a sly question about their night together, totally sidestepping. Meanwhile, Eva scrolls through Joe's phone logs, spots his Tinder chat with Lily, and pieces together her address. She taps Jude on the shoulder. "Send it to Joe now." He nods, hits send, and the task force springs into action. At the very same moment, Joe slips into Real Abbott's office. Abbott looks up from a stack of classified files and warns him in a low voice, "Stay away from Marty Frost's investigation, Turner." Across town, Marty Frost corrals the task force in a secure briefing room and leans forward. "Watch Turner closely, and if he goes off the rails, terminate him." Back at the hacker's hideout, Joubert receives the location details, checks her screen, and with cold precision, executes the battered hacker right in his own room. Later that evening, Joe's still tapping away at his laptop when Lily's phone buzzes. She reads Bob Partridge's urgent text, "Get out, now." Before Joe can react, Lily snatches her pepper spray and, panicked, sprays him in the face. They crash against the sofa, grappling wildly until Lily goes limp. In seconds, Eva Piper's team surrounds the house, storms inside, and finds only Gabrielle Joubert standing there, arms folded. Joe and Lily have vanished. Joubert calmly flips open her badge and says, "I have authorization." They check her credentials, and sure enough, she's a federal agent.